Amanda Richardson stared at the email on her computer screen, her hands trembling as she read the subject line. Salary adjustment. Effective immediately. After single-handedly saving Meridian Technologies from bankruptcy, after working 18-hour days for 3 months straight, after sacrificing her health, her relationships, and her sanity to pull the company back from the brink of collapse, her boss had just slashed her salary by 80%. But what Amanda didn't know was that one email, sent exactly 72 hours later, would change everything she thought she knew about loyalty, corporate greed, and the price of doing the right thing. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The fluorescent lights of Meridian Technologies buzzed overhead as Amanda Richardson walked through the empty office. Corridors at 6:30 a.m., her heels clicking against the polished concrete floors. She had been arriving at this time every morning for the past 3 years, long before anyone else showed up, using those quiet hours to review financial reports, analyze market trends, and prepare for whatever crisis would inevitably land on her desk by 9 a.m. As the senior financial analyst for the mid-sized tech company based in Austin, Texas. Amanda had carved out a reputation as the problem solver, the one who could untangle the most complex budget disasters and find money where others saw only debt. At 32, she had already saved the company from 3 major financial crises, each time working around the clock to identify cost-saving opportunities and revenue streams that others had missed. Her corner office overlooked the Colorado River, and on clear mornings like this one, she could see the early joggers making their way along the trail that wound through downtown Austin. Amanda often wondered what it would be like to have that kind of free time, to wake up and choose to exercise instead of diving straight into spreadsheets and quarterly projections. But she loved her work, loved the intellectual challenge of turning numbers into strategies, loved the feeling of being indispensable. The coffee maker in the break room gurgled to life as Amanda pressed the button, waiting for her first cup of what would inevitably be 8 or 9 throughout the day. She had tried to cut back on caffeine, especially after her doctor mentioned her elevated blood pressure during her last physical, but the demanding pace of her job seemed to require constant stimulation. While the coffee brewed, she scrolled through her phone, checking the overnight emails from their European partners and the latest market reports from Asia. Everything seemed normal that Tuesday morning in September. The company's stock price had stabilized after a turbulent summer. Their latest product launch was gaining traction in the market, and the third quarter numbers were looking better than projected. Amanda had spent the previous weekend reviewing the financial forecasts, and for the first time in months, she felt cautiously optimistic about Meridian's trajectory. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger sister, Sarah, who lived in Portland and worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm. "Coffee date this weekend? I'm driving down to visit Mom and Dad." Amanda smiled, typing back quickly. "Maybe. Big presentation Thursday. We'll know more after that." It was the same response she gave every time Sarah suggested plans, and she felt a familiar pang of guilt as she hit send. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 15th floor, and Amanda made her way to her office, balancing her coffee, mug, laptop bag, and a stack of reports she had taken home the previous evening. The building's heating system hadn't quite adjusted to the cooler September weather, and the office felt stuffy despite the early hour. She opened her window a crack, letting in the sound of morning traffic and the distant hum of construction from the new high-rise going up across the street. Amanda's desk was organized with military precision, 3 monitors arranged in a perfect eye, arc, color-coded files sorted by priority, and a small succulent plant that somehow managed to thrive despite the artificial lighting and her frequent late nights. The plant had been a gift from her assistant, Marcus, who insisted that every office needed something living to balance out all the technology. She was halfway through her morning routine of checking overnight reports when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Robert Chen, CEO, and Amanda felt her stomach tighten slightly. Robert rarely called this early unless something was wrong, and his timing usually meant she was about to inherit someone else's emergency. Amanda, glad I caught you early. Robert's voice carried its usual brisk efficiency. We need to talk. Can you come up to my office in 10 minutes? Of course. Should I bring anything specific? Just yourself. And Amanda, close the door when you come in. The line went dead, leaving Amanda staring at her phone with a growing sense of unease. In her 3 years at Meridian, she had learned to read the subtle signals in Robert's communication style. The request to close the door meant confidential information. The lack of specifics meant the situation was either very good or very bad, with no middle ground. She saved her work, grabbed a fresh legal pad, and made her way to the executive floor. Robert's office occupied the entire northeast corner of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of downtown Austin. The space was decorated in what Amanda privately called executive minimalism. Expensive furniture arranged to suggest both success and accessibility, with carefully chosen art pieces that projected sophistication without being distracting. Robert was standing behind his desk when she entered, his back to the door as he gazed out at the city skyline. At 48, he had the lean build of someone who took his personal fitness seriously, and his silver hair was cut in a style that suggested both authority and approachability. He had founded Meridian Technologies 12 years earlier, building it from a 3-person startup into a company with over 200 employees and annual revenue approaching $50 million. Amanda, sit down, he said, without turning around. We have a problem. She settled into one of the leather chairs facing his desk, her legal pad balanced on her lap. What kind of problem? Robert finally turned, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. The kind that could put us out of business in the next 90 days. Amanda felt her heart rate increase. The Morrison Industries contract? Worse. Much worse. Robert moved to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. I got a call last night from our legal team. Apparently, Morrison Industries has been conducting their own financial audit of our partnership, and they've found some irregularities. What kind of irregularities? The kind that could result in a $50 million lawsuit and the immediate termination of our largest contract. Robert's voice was steady, but Amanda could see the tension in his shoulders. They're claiming we've been inflating our development costs and billing them for work that was never completed. Amanda's mind raced through the implications. The Morrison Industries contract represented nearly 40% of Meridian's total revenue. Losing it would be devastating, but a $50 million lawsuit would be catastrophic. Have you reviewed their claims? That's where you come in. I need you to conduct a complete forensic audit of every transaction, every invoice, every expense report related to the Morrison contract for the past 18 months. I need to know if their claims have any merit, and if they do, I need to know exactly how bad this situation really is. How long do we have? They've given us 30 days to respond with a comprehensive report. If we can't prove that their claims are unfounded, they'll file the lawsuit and terminate the contract. Robert sat down heavily in his chair. Amanda, I'm not exaggerating when I say that the future of this company depends on what you find in the next month. Amanda nodded, her mind already shifting into crisis mode. I'll need access to everything: accounting records, project files, correspondence, expense reports, and I'll need to interview key personnel who worked on the Morrison projects. You'll have whatever you need. I'm also assigning Marcus to work with you full-time on this. Consider everything else on your plate to be a secondary priority. What about the rest of the team? Do they know about this? Robert shook his head. For now, this stays between us, Marcus, and the legal team. If word gets out before we understand the full scope of the problem, it could trigger a panic that would make the situation even worse. Amanda stood up, clutching her legal pad. I'll start immediately. But Robert, I need to ask, do you have any reason to believe that Morrison's claims might be legitimate? Robert was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the folder in front of him. "I hope not, Amanda. But I've learned that hope isn't a strategy. That's why I need you to find the truth, whatever it is." Walking back to her office, Amanda felt the weight of the company's future settling on her shoulders. She had handled financial crises before, but nothing of this magnitude. $50 million was more than Meridian's total liquid assets. If Morrison Industries followed through on their threat, the company wouldn't just be damaged, it would be destroyed. She spent the next hour creating a detailed action plan, breaking down the massive audit into manageable components. The Morrison contract files were stored in both digital and physical formats, scattered across multiple departments and dating back nearly 2 years. She would need to review thousands of documents, cross-reference every expense with supporting documentation, and trace every dollar to ensure it was properly allocated and justified. Marcus arrived at 8:30, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had already been briefed on the situation. At 26, he had been Amanda's assistant for 8 months, and his background in forensic accounting made him the perfect partner for this kind of investigation. "Rough morning?" he asked, setting one of the coffee cups on her desk. "About to get rougher. We need to set up a war room. Conference Room B is available this week. I want every Morrison file moved there, along with extra computers, printers, and enough coffee to keep us running for the next month." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Already on it. Facilities are setting up the room this morning, and IT is installing additional network access. I also contacted our document management company to expedite the retrieval of archived files. Amanda smiled despite the stress. "This is why I keep you around. That and my sparkling personality. So, what's our timeline? 30 days to review 18 months of financial records and produce a report that either saves the company or confirms that we're finished." Amanda pulled up the Morrison contract files on her computer. "We'll work in shifts. I'll take the first 6 months of records. You take the middle 6, and we'll tackle the most recent 6 months together." "What exactly are we looking for?" "Anything that could support Morrison's claims. Inflated costs, duplicate billing, charges for work that wasn't completed, personal expenses coded to the project, anything that could be interpreted as fraud or misrepresentation." Marcus nodded, already making notes. "And if we find something?" "Then we figure out how to fix it, minimize the damage, and hope that Morrison is willing to negotiate rather than litigate." By 10 a.m., Conference Room B had been transformed into their investigation headquarters. The long table was covered with boxes of files, 3 laptops were humming quietly, and a large whiteboard displayed their timeline and key objectives. Amanda had changed into more comfortable clothes, jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire, and had pulled her dark hair back into a ponytail. The first day of the audit revealed the scope of the challenge ahead. The Morrison Industries contract was incredibly complex, involving multiple projects, dozens of subcontractors, and a billing structure that changed 3 times during the 18-month period. Every invoice had to be cross-referenced with project milestones, expense reports, and delivery confirmations. Amanda discovered that the project had been managed by 3 different teams over its duration, each with their own accounting methods and documentation standards. The original project manager, David Sullivan, had left the company 6 months earlier, taking with him much of the institutional knowledge about the early phases of the contract. "This is going to take longer than 30 days, Marcus observed, as he reviewed a stack of expense reports from the project's first quarter. "We don't have longer than 30 days, Amanda replied, highlighting discrepancies in a spreadsheet. "We'll work weekends, nights, whatever it takes." As the first week progressed, Amanda began to uncover troubling patterns in the financial records. Several invoices appeared to be duplicated, with the same work billed to Morrison under different project codes. Expense reports showed charges for meals and travel that seemed excessive for the scope of work being performed. Most concerning, there were gaps in the documentation, missing receipts, incomplete project reports, and invoices that had been approved without proper supporting materials. "Amanda, you need to see this," Marcus called from across the room on Friday afternoon. He was holding a printout of email correspondence between David Sullivan and the Morrison Industries project coordinator. She walked over to his workstation, where he had pulled up a series of emails from the previous spring. "Look at this exchange. From March. Morrison's coordinator is questioning why their invoice increased by 30% in the second quarter, and David's response is, 'Interesting.'" Amanda read the email thread carefully. David Sullivan had explained the cost increase by citing expanded project scope and additional deliverables, but the attached project documentation didn't support his claims. The work described in the invoices was identical to what had been outlined in the original contract. "This is exactly what Morrison is claiming," Amanda said quietly. "They're saying we charged them for work that was already included in the base contract. And there's more. I found similar patterns in April and May. It looks like David was systematically inflating the billing to Morrison, possibly to cover cost overruns on other projects." Amanda felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. "How much are we talking about?" Marcus pulled up a spreadsheet he had been building throughout the week. "Based on what I've found so far, we potentially overbilled Morrison by somewhere between $8 and $12 million over the 18-month period." "Potentially?" "I can't prove it yet. The documentation is incomplete, and some of the charges might be legitimate if we can find the supporting materials. But Amanda, the pattern is clear. Someone was manipulating the billing structure to inflate costs." Amanda sank into the nearest chair, the weight of the discovery pressing down on her. $8 to $12 million in potential overbilling was more than enough to justify Morrison's lawsuit. It was also enough to destroy Meridian's reputation and possibly land key personnel in prison. "We need to find David Sullivan," she said finally. "He's the only one who can explain these charges and provide the missing documentation." "I already tried. He's moved to Seattle and isn't returning calls. His LinkedIn profile says he's between opportunities." "Then we keep digging. There has to be an explanation for these charges. Maybe David was sloppy with his documentation, but I can't believe he would deliberately defraud a client." But even as she said the words, Amanda wasn't sure she believed them. The evidence was mounting, and the pattern was too consistent to be explained by simple accounting errors. Someone had been systematically inflating the Morrison Industries billing, and the most likely culprit was the man who had managed the project for most of its duration. The weekend brought no relief. Amanda and Marcus worked through Saturday and Sunday, reviewing every remaining document, cross-referencing every charge, and building a comprehensive timeline of the project's financial history. By Sunday evening, the picture was clear and deeply troubling. "We need to tell Robert," Marcus said as he printed out their preliminary findings. "He needs to know what we've discovered." Amanda looked at the stack of evidence they had compiled. Hundreds of pages of financial records, email correspondence, and analysis that painted a picture of systematic fraud. "This is going to destroy the company." "Maybe. Or maybe there's still time to fix it." "How do you fix $8 million in fraudulent billing?" "I don't know. But that's not our job. Our job was to find the truth, and we found it." Amanda nodded, but she felt no satisfaction in their success. They had uncovered the truth, but the truth was devastating. In less than 3 weeks, she would have to present their findings to Robert, knowing that her report would likely trigger the collapse of the company she had worked so hard to protect. The irony wasn't lost on her. For 3 years, she had been the one who solved financial crises, who found ways to save money and increase revenue. Now, she was about to deliver the news that would end it all. Monday morning arrived with the first cold snap of the season, and Amanda walked through the empty office corridors with a heavy heart. In a few hours, She would have to tell Robert Chen that his company was built on a foundation of fraud, and that the loyal employees who had worked so hard to build Meridian Technologies were about to lose everything because of one man's greed. But first, she had to finish the investigation. There were still loose ends to tie up, still questions to answer, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she held on to a slim hope that they might find something, anything, that could change the outcome of this disaster. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected breakthrough. While organizing David Sullivan's old files, Marcus discovered a locked drawer in the former project manager's desk that facilities had forgotten to clean out. Inside, they found a personal notebook filled with handwritten notes and calculations that told a very different story. "Amanda, you need to see this immediately," Marcus called out, his voice carrying an excitement she hadn't heard in days. She hurried over to find him holding a worn leather notebook, its pages filled with David's distinctive handwriting. "What am I looking at?" "David's personal project notes. Look at this entry from February." Marcus pointed to a page dated 3 months before the billing irregularities began. "He's documenting conversations with someone named RC about adjusting project margins to cover unexpected corporate expenses." Amanda felt her pulse quicken. RC could be Robert Chen. "That's what I thought. But look at this entry from March." Marcus flipped the page. "David writes about being uncomfortable with the directive to inflate Morrison billing and wanting to document everything for protection." Amanda read the entry carefully. David had written, "RC insists the Morrison contract can absorb additional costs from the failed Henderson project. Says we can't afford to write off the $3 million loss. Told him this feels wrong, but he says it's temporary. We'll correct it when Morrison contract renews. Making copies of everything just in case." "This changes everything," Amanda whispered. David wasn't acting alone. He was following orders. Marcus turned to another page. "It gets worse. Look at this entry from April. RC says Morrison will never audit their bills closely enough to notice the adjustments. If they do, we'll claim the charges were legitimate expansion costs. Says I'm being paid to execute strategy, not question it." Amanda sank into a chair, her mind racing through the implications. If David's notes were accurate, Robert Chen had orchestrated the entire fraud, using the Morrison contract to cover losses from other failed projects. David had been the reluctant executor, not the mastermind. "We need to verify this," Amanda said finally. "Cross-reference these dates with the Henderson project files. If David was telling the truth, there should be a paper trail showing exactly how much money that project lost." The Henderson project files painted a devastating picture. Meridian had secured a contract to develop a custom software platform for Henderson manufacturing, but the project had spiraled out of control from the beginning. Technical challenges, scope creep, and missed deadlines had turned what should have been a profitable contract into a $3 million disaster. "Look at the timeline," Marcus pointed to a project summary document. Henderson officially terminated their contract in February, the same month David started documenting his conversations with Robert about adjusting project margins. Amanda reviewed the financial records, tracing the flow of money between projects. The pattern was clear. As Henderson project costs mounted, charges to the Morrison contract increased proportionally. Robert had used Morrison Industries as an unwitting bank, covering the losses from one failed project by inflating the billing. On a successful one. "We need to confront Robert with this evidence," Amanda said. "Are you sure? If he's willing to commit fraud to cover up losses, what else might he be willing to do?" Amanda considered the question. She had worked for Robert Chen for 3 years, and while she had always found him demanding and results-focused, she had never seen signs of criminal behavior. But the evidence in David's notebook painted a picture of a man desperate enough to risk everything to avoid admitting failure. "We don't have a choice. In 2 weeks, I have to present our findings to Morrison Industries. If I'm going to recommend that Meridian fight their allegations, I need to understand exactly what happened and why." That afternoon, Amanda requested a private meeting with Robert. She climbed the stairs to the executive floor carrying David's notebook and a folder of supporting documents, her hands steady despite the gravity of what she was about to discuss. Robert was reviewing quarterly projections when she entered his office. "Amanda, perfect timing. How's the Morrison investigation progressing?" "That's what I need to discuss with you." Amanda sat down and placed David's notebook on the desk between them. "We found this in David Sullivan's old workspace." Robert's expression didn't change as he looked at the notebook, but Amanda noticed his hands pause over his keyboard. "What is it?" "David's personal project notes, including detailed documentation of conversations about inflating Morrison Industries, billing to cover losses from the Henderson manufacturing project." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Robert's eyes moved from the notebook to Amanda's face, as if calculating his options. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and measured. David Sullivan was a disgruntled employee who left under difficult circumstances. "Are you really going to base your investigation on unsubstantiated claims in a personal notebook?" "The notebook entries correlate exactly with the billing irregularities we've identified." David documented specific conversations about using Morrison charges to cover Henderson losses. The financial records support his claims. Robert leaned back in his chair. "Amanda, you've been under enormous pressure for the past 2 weeks. Maybe you're seeing patterns that don't exist. I've verified everything. The Henderson project lost exactly $3 million. The Morrison contract was inflated by approximately the same amount over the same time period. The correlation isn't coincidental. Even if that were true, which I'm not admitting, David Sullivan was the project manager. Any billing decisions were his responsibility." Amanda opened the folder and pulled out copies of internal emails. "These are email authorizations from your account approving the inflated Morrison invoices. David requested approval for every billing adjustment, and you provided it." Robert was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents. When he looked up, his expression had hardened. "Amanda, I need you to understand something. This company employs over 200 people. Those people have families, mortgages, college tuition payments. The Henderson project was a disaster that could have destroyed everything we've built. So you decided to commit fraud instead?" "I decided to ensure that one failed project didn't destroy the livelihoods of 200 innocent people. The Morrison contract was incredibly profitable. They could absorb the additional costs without any real impact on their business." Amanda stared at him in disbelief. "You're talking about $8 million in fraudulent charges. I'm talking about survival. You weren't here when I started this company with nothing but an idea and a borrowed laptop. You don't understand what it means to watch something you've built from scratch start to crumble because of factors beyond your control." "But it wasn't beyond your control. You made a choice to cover up the Henderson losses instead of taking responsibility for them." Robert stood up and walked to the window, his back to Amanda. "The plan was always to correct the billing when the Morrison contract renewed. We would have reduced future charges to compensate for the temporary adjustments. No one would have been permanently harmed. Except Morrison Industries never would have agreed to the inflated renewal terms if they knew about the fraudulent charges. They would have negotiated, like they always do. The final result would have been the same." Amanda felt a surge of anger. "That's not how business works, Robert. You can't just decide that your problems justify defrauding your customers." Robert turned back to face her. "I made a judgment call to protect this company and its employees. If that makes me a criminal in your eyes, so be it. What about David Sullivan? You let him take the blame for decisions you made. David was compensated well for his work. If he chose to document his concerns instead of refusing to execute legitimate business strategies, that was his decision." Amanda stood up, gathering the documents. "This isn't a legitimate business strategy. It's fraud, and it's going to destroy the company anyway when Morrison Industries files their lawsuit. Only if you tell them what you found." The words hung. in the air between them, carrying an implication that made Amanda's stomach clench. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your report will determine the future of this company. You can focus on the technical billing irregularities and recommend a settlement that protects our employees. Or you can pursue a moral crusade that destroys everything we've worked to build. You want me to lie in my report? I want you to consider the bigger picture. Morrison Industries is a Fortune 500 company with billions in revenue. $8 million is pocket change to them. But to us, admitting fault means bankruptcy, unemployment for 200 people, and the end of everything we've accomplished. Amanda felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. She had uncovered the truth, but Robert was asking her to bury it in service of a greater good. 200 employees who had no knowledge of the fraud would suffer if she told the complete truth. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. "You have until Friday to submit your preliminary report. I trust you'll make the right decision." Amanda left Robert's office feeling more conflicted than ever. The evidence was clear. Robert Chen had orchestrated a systematic fraud to cover up the Henderson project losses. But his argument about protecting innocent employees wasn't entirely wrong. The people working in the cubicles below had no idea their company was built on fraudulent billing, and they would be the ones who suffered most if Meridian collapsed. That evening, Amanda sat in her apartment, staring at David Sullivan's notebook and wrestling with the most difficult decision of her career. She had always prided herself on her integrity, on doing the right thing regardless of the consequences. But what was the right thing when the truth would destroy the livelihoods of innocent people? Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister, Sarah. "Still planning to visit this weekend? Mom's making your favorite dinner." Amanda realized she hadn't thought about her family in days, hadn't considered anything beyond the crisis consuming her professional life. She typed back, "Not sure. Yet. Work situation is complicated." Sarah's response came immediately. "Everything okay? You sound stressed." Amanda stared at the phone, wondering how to explain that she was holding the future of 200 families in her hands, that she had discovered a truth that could destroy a company and the man who had built it. Instead, she typed, "Just a difficult project. I'll call you tomorrow." But as she set the phone aside and returned to David's notebook, Amanda knew that tomorrow would bring no easy answers. She had 48 hours to decide between protecting the truth and protecting the innocent, between her personal integrity and the greater good. The evidence was damning, but the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. Wednesday morning arrived with unexpected drama. Amanda was reviewing her report draft when Marcus burst into the war room, his face pale and his hands shaking slightly. "We have a bigger problem," he announced, dropping a manila envelope onto the table. "I slipped under my apartment door last. Amanda opened the envelope to find photocopies of additional financial documents she had never seen before, along with a handwritten note. "There's more you don't know." David Sullivan wasn't the only one keeping records. Check the Blackstone Industries contract from 2022. Same pattern. RC has done this before. Someone who wants the truth to come out. "Anonymous tip?" Amanda asked, studying the documents. "Has to be. But look at these Blackstone files. If this is legitimate, Robert used the same strategy 18 months ago. The Blackstone Industries documents painted a disturbing picture of repetitive behavior. In 2022, when Meridian's software development project for coastal banking had gone over budget by $2.8 million, charges to the Blackstone Industries contract had mysteriously increased by the exact same amount over the following 6 months. Amanda cross-referenced the dates with Meridian's internal project records. The pattern was identical to the Morrison situation, a failed project creating unexpected losses, followed by systematic inflation of charges to a profitable client to cover the shortfall. "He's been doing this for years," Amanda whispered. "This isn't about protecting employees from one bad project. This is a business model." Marcus pulled up Blackstone's payment records on his laptop. Here's the interesting part. Blackstone never questioned the inflated charges. They paid everything, without complaint, and renewed their contract the following year. So Robert learned that he could get away with it. Morrison Industries just happened to be more diligent about auditing their expenses. Which means there could be other contracts we haven't discovered yet. If Robert has been systematically using profitable clients to cover losses from failed projects, the total fraud could be much larger than we thought. Amanda felt overwhelmed by the expanding scope of the criminal activity. What had started as an investigation into $8 million in questionable charges was revealing a pattern of fraud that could involve tens of millions of dollars across multiple clients and years. "We need to find out who sent this," she said, holding up the anonymous note. "I have a theory about that. Yesterday, I noticed Janet Kim from accounting acting nervous around me. She's worked here since the company started, and she would have processed all these invoices." Janet Kim was Meridian's senior accountant, a quiet woman in her 50s who managed the company's billing and accounts receivable. Amanda had always found her professional but distant, the kind of employee who kept her head down and avoided office politics. They found Janet in her cubicle, surrounded by stacks of invoices and financial reports. When Amanda approached, Janet looked up with an expression that suggested she had been expecting this conversation. "Janet, do you have a few minutes to talk? Privately?" "Conference room C is empty," Janet replied, already standing up. Her movements were quick and nervous, like someone who had been carrying a heavy secret for too long. Once they were seated in the small conference room, Janet folded, her hands on the table, and looked directly at Amanda. "You found the Blackstone documents. You sent them?" Janet nodded. "I've been hoping someone would investigate the billing irregularities for months. When I heard you were auditing the Morrison contract, I thought this might be my chance to finally do something about what I've been seeing." "How long have you known about the fraudulent billing?" "Since the Blackstone situation in 2022. Robert asked me to process invoices that didn't match the supporting documentation, and when I questioned the discrepancies, he told me I was being paid to execute instructions, not audit them." Amanda leaned forward. "Why didn't you report it then?" "To whom?" "Robert owns the company. The board of directors meets quarterly and rubber stamps whatever he recommends. I'm a single mother with 2 kids in college, and I couldn't afford to lose my job over suspicions I couldn't prove." "But you kept records?" "Copies of everything. Every questionable invoice, every email directive, every conversation where Robert told me to process charges that didn't make sense. I figured someday I might need to protect myself." Marcus opened his laptop. "How many other contracts have been affected?" Janet was quiet for a moment, as if calculating the scope of what she was about to reveal. "Besides Morrison and Blackstone? At least 3 others that I can document: Pinnacle Systems, TechFlow Solutions, and Global Dynamics. The pattern is always the same. When a project goes over budget or fails completely, Robert shifts the losses to profitable contracts with clients who don't audit their bills carefully. What's the total amount we're talking about?" "Based on my records, approximately $26 million in fraudulent charges across 5 clients over the past 3 years. Amanda felt the room spinning around her. $26 million. Wasn't just fraud, it was organized criminal enterprise. Robert Chen hadn't made a desperate decision to save his company from one failed project. He had created a systematic method of stealing from clients to maintain Meridian's profitability. "Janet, why are you telling us this now?" "Because I can't live with it anymore. Every month, I process more fraudulent invoices, and every month I tell myself I'm protecting my job and my family. But what happens when one of these clients figures out what we've been doing? What happens to all the innocent employees who don't know their paychecks are funded by stolen money?" Amanda understood Janet's dilemma perfectly. The accountant had been trapped in the same impossible situation that Amanda now faced, knowing the truth but feeling powerless to act on it without destroying innocent lives. "There's something else," Janet continued. Yesterday, Robert asked me to prepare a list of employees who have access to sensitive financial records. He said it was for a security audit, but the timing seems suspicious. What kind of list? Everyone. Who could potentially discover the billing irregularities. Your name was at the top, followed by Marcus, myself, and 3 people from the IT department who manage the accounting systems. Amanda felt a chill run down her spine. He's identifying potential threats. That's what I thought. Which is why I decided I had to act now, before Robert finds a way to silence anyone who might expose what he's been doing. Marcus looked up, from his laptop, where he had been taking notes. Janet, would you be willing to testify about what you've witnessed if this goes to trial? I've been thinking about that for months. If it means stopping Robert from continuing this fraud, yes. I'll testify, but I need guarantees that I'll be protected from retaliation. Amanda made a decision that surprised even herself. Janet, I want you to contact the FBI. The FBI? $26 million in systematic fraud across multiple clients is a federal crime. This is beyond what Morrison Industries can handle in a civil lawsuit. Robert needs to be prosecuted criminally. Janet paled at the suggestion. If I contact the FBI, this becomes public immediately. The company will collapse, and everyone will lose their jobs anyway. The company is going to collapse regardless. The only question is whether Robert faces consequences for what he's done, or whether he finds a way to blame someone else and walk away with millions in stolen money. Marcus closed his laptop. Amanda's right. If we don't act now, Robert will find a way to pin this on David Sullivan, or Janet, or anyone else he can scapegoat. We have the evidence to prove he orchestrated everything. Janet sat quietly for several minutes, weighing her options. Finally, she looked up at Amanda. If I do this, I need your promise that you'll support my testimony with your audit findings. You have it. And I need to know that you're prepared for what Robert will do when he realizes we've exposed him. Amanda thought about the conversation she'd had with Robert the previous day, his suggestion that she focus on the bigger picture rather than moral crusades. She thought about the list of employees with access to sensitive information and Robert's interest in identifying potential threats. What do you think he'll do? I think he'll try to destroy anyone who threatens his version of events, and I think he's already started. That afternoon, Amanda received an email from Human Resources requesting her presence at a disciplinary meeting. The following morning, the subject line read, Performance Issues and Workplace Conduct, and the message was signed by both the HR director and Robert Chen. Marcus received a similar email 30 minutes later. He's moving faster than we expected, Amanda said, forwarding copies of both emails to her personal account. What's the meeting about? Officially? Performance issues? Unofficially? Robert is creating a paper trail to justify firing us before we can complete our investigation. Can he do that? He can do whatever he wants. He owns the company. Amanda looked around the war room, filled with evidence of systematic fraud spanning 3 years and multiple clients. Tomorrow morning, she would walk into a meeting designed to discredit her professionally and personally. By tomorrow afternoon, she might be unemployed and facing retaliation from a man who had already demonstrated his willingness to commit federal crimes. But she also knew that Janet Kim would be contacting the FBI within hours, and that the evidence they had assembled would be preserved regardless of what happened to her career. For the first time since this investigation began, Amanda felt something she hadn't expected: relief. The decision had been made for her. Robert's attempt to silence her had eliminated any doubt about the right course of action. The truth was going to come out, and Robert Chen was going to face the consequences of his choices. Thursday morning's disciplinary meeting took place in Naidisiam, the main conference room, with Robert Chen, HR Director Patricia Williams, and legal counsel Michael Torres seated across from Amanda like a tribunal. The formal setup felt deliberately intimidating, designed to make her feel isolated and defensive. Amanda, thank you for coming. Patricia began, her voice professionally neutral but carrying an undertone of disappointment. "We've received concerning reports about your conduct during the Morrison Industries investigation." Amanda kept her expression calm despite her racing pulse. "What kind of concerns?" Michael Torres opened a folder and pulled out several documents. "We have evidence that you've been accessing confidential files outside the scope of your authorized investigation, sharing sensitive company information with unauthorized personnel, and conducting interrogations of employees without proper HR oversight. I've been conducting a comprehensive audit as requested by Mr. Chen. Everything I've accessed has been directly related to the Morrison contract." Robert leaned forward slightly. "Amanda, we found evidence that you accessed the Blackstone Industries files, the Coastal Banking Project records, and several other contracts that have no connection to the Morrison investigation. Can you explain why?" Amanda realized that Robert had been monitoring her computer access, tracking every file she had opened during the investigation. "I was following financial trails that appeared connected to the Morrison billing irregularities." "That's not what you were asked to do," Patricia interjected. "Your investigation was supposed to focus specifically on Morrison Industries. By expanding beyond that scope without authorization, you've violated company policy regarding confidential information." Michael Torres slid a document across the table. "This is a formal reprimand for unauthorized access to confidential files and insubordination. It also includes a salary reduction to reflect your new position as junior financial analyst, effective immediately." Amanda looked at the document, her heart sinking as she read the details. Her annual salary was being reduced from $89,000 to $18,000, an 80% cut that would make it impossible for her to maintain her apartment, her car payments, or any semblance of her current lifestyle. "You're demoting me for doing the job you asked me to do." Robert's expression remained impassive. "We're adjusting your position to reflect your demonstrated inability to follow clear instructions and respect appropriate boundaries." "And if I refuse to sign this?" "Then we'll have to consider termination for cause, which would affect your eligibility for unemployment benefits and make it difficult for you to find employment elsewhere in the industry." Amanda stared at the three people across from her, understanding the calculated cruelty of their strategy. Robert couldn't fire her outright without raising suspicions about retaliation, but he could make her life so financially difficult that she would be forced to resign or accept whatever terms he offered. "I need time to consider this." "You have until 5 o'clock today," Patricia said. "If you don't sign the agreement by then, we'll proceed with termination proceedings." Amanda stood up, leaving the document on the table. "I'll give you my answer this afternoon." Walking back to her office, Amanda felt the walls closing in around her. Robert had moved more quickly and decisively than she had anticipated, using the company's HR and legal departments to legitimize what was essentially economic warfare against anyone who threatened his position. Marcus was waiting in her office when she arrived, holding a similar document. 80% salary cut?" "Same here. How did your meeting go?" "About what you'd expect. They're claiming I violated IT security policies by accessing files without proper authorization. Either I accept demotion to an entry-level position at $20,000 a year, or I'm fired for cause." Amanda sank into her chair, feeling the weight of Robert's retaliation strategy. "He's trying to make it financially impossible for us to continue working here while avoiding wrongful termination lawsuits. It's working. I can't survive on $20,000 a year in Austin. I'll have to move back in with my parents." Amanda's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Coffee shop on 6th Street. 1 hour. Come alone. JK." Janet Kim was waiting in a corner booth at the small cafe, wearing sunglasses despite being indoors and looking nervously around the room. When Amanda approached, Janet gestured for her to sit quickly. "I contacted the FBI this morning," Janet said without preamble. "Agent Sarah Mitchell from the Financial Crimes Unit. She's very interested in our evidence." "What did you tell her?" "Everything. The systematic fraud, the multiple clients, the total dollar amounts. She wants to meet with you and Marcus tomorrow. Morning. Amanda felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. What happens next? Agent Mitchell said they'll need to verify our evidence independently before they can take action. That could take several weeks. In the meantime, she advised us to document any retaliation from Robert and avoid doing anything that might alert him to the FBI investigation. Too late for that. Robert just cut my salary by 80% and threatened to fire me if I don't. Accept the demotion. Janet's face went pale. He did the same thing to you? And Marcus. Robert is systematically destroying anyone who could testify against him. Agent Mitchell warned me this might happen. She said Robert would likely try to discredit or silence potential witnesses before the investigation became public. Amanda leaned across the table. Janet, I need to ask you something important. Are you prepared for what's going to happen when this goes public? When the FBI arrests Robert, the company will probably collapse. Everyone will lose their jobs, including you. I've been thinking about that all night. But Amanda, what's the alternative? We let Robert continue stealing from clients until someone else discovers the fraud? We let him destroy the lives of anyone who threatens to expose him? The 200 employees who work here don't deserve to lose their jobs because of Robert's crimes. And the clients who've been defrauded don't deserve to have their money stolen. Morrison Industries, Blackstone, all the others, they're victims too. Amanda knew Janet was right, but the emotional weight of destroying so many innocent lives still felt overwhelming. How long do we have before the FBI acts? Agent Mitchell said they'll need at least 2 weeks to verify our evidence and build a case. During that time, we need to keep working normally and avoid giving Robert any reason to suspect we've contacted law enforcement. That's going to be difficult, considering he just tried to financially destroy Marcus and me. Which is why you need to accept the salary reduction? Amanda stared at Janet in shock. Accept it? If you refuse and get fired, Robert will claim you were a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. If you accept the demotion and continue working, it proves you were acting in good faith throughout the investigation. I can't survive on $18,000 a year. You won't have to. Agent Mitchell said the FBI has programs to protect witnesses who suffer retaliation. They can provide financial assistance and help you find new employment once the case is resolved. Amanda considered the proposal. 2 weeks of working for poverty wages while pretending everything was normal, knowing that Robert was a criminal, who was actively trying to destroy her life. 2 weeks of sitting in meetings and processing reports while federal agents built a case that would eventually bring down the company she had worked so hard to protect. What about Marcus? Same advice: accept the demotion, keep working, document everything Robert does, and wait for the FBI to act. That afternoon, Amanda signed the salary reduction agreement in Patricia Williams' office, her hand steady despite the magnitude of what she was accepting. Robert wasn't present for the signing, but Amanda knew he would be informed within minutes of her decision. Marcus signed his agreement an hour later, and they spent the remainder of the day moving their personal belongings to much smaller offices on the 3rd floor. Their new workspace was a shared cubicle in the general accounting department, a deliberate humiliation designed to demonstrate their reduced status to the rest of the company. As they packed up the war room that had been their headquarters for the past 2 weeks, Amanda looked at the evidence they had assembled: thousands of pages of financial records, email correspondence, and documentation that would eventually send Robert Chen to federal prison. "Are we doing the right thing?" Marcus asked as he boxed up the last of David Sullivan's files. "Ask me in 2 weeks when the FBI arrests him. And if the company collapses, then we'll know we choose truth over comfort, justice over job security. Sometimes that's the only choice that matters." Friday morning brought an unexpected email to all company employees. Town hall meeting, Monday 2 p.m., mandatory attendance. The message was signed by Robert Chen and included a cryptic reference to important updates regarding company direction and personnel changes. Amanda forwarded the email to Agent Mitchell with a simple message. He's planning something. The response came back within an hour. Document everything. We're moving faster than expected. The investigation that had started as a routine audit to defend against client allegations had become a federal criminal case with Amanda and her colleagues caught in the crossfire between a desperate CEO and the FBI agents working to bring him to justice. In 72 hours, everything would change again. Monday arrived with an electric tension that seemed to permeate every corner of Meridian Technologies. Amanda arrived at her shared cubicle by 7 a.m., determined to document every detail of what she suspected would be Robert's final play. The mandatory town hall meeting wasn't scheduled until 2 p.m., but she could feel the anticipation building among her colleagues, most of whom had no idea they were about to witness the culmination of a federal criminal investigation. Marcus appeared at 7:30, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who hadn't slept well. "Any word from Agent Mitchell?" She texted at 6 a.m. "The FBI will be positioned outside the building during the town hall meeting. If Robert says anything incriminating in front of 200 witnesses, they're prepared to move immediately. And if he doesn't, then we wait for their investigation to conclude normally. But Mitchell thinks he's going to make some kind of announcement that will force their hand." Throughout the morning, Amanda noticed unusual activity in the executive offices. Security personnel she didn't recognize were seen entering and leaving Robert's floor, and several employees reported seeing men in suits conducting what appeared to be interviews with key personnel. At 11 a.m., Patricia Williams from HR sent an email to all department heads requesting updated personnel files and contact information for all employees to be submitted before the town hall meeting. The timing felt ominous, as if the company was preparing for major organizational changes. Amanda was reviewing financial reports when her computer chimed with an incoming email from an address she didn't recognize: david.sullivan.consulting@eggmail.com. Her heart raced as she opened the message. "Amanda, heard through mutual contacts that you've been investigating the Morrison situation. I'm flying back to Austin today and will be at the town hall meeting. There are things about Robert Chen that you need to know, things that go beyond the billing irregularities you've discovered. He's not going to go down quietly, and he's prepared to sacrifice anyone to save himself. I have recordings. Meet me in the parking garage after the meeting. Level B2, northwest corner. Come alone and bring whatever evidence you've compiled. It's time to end this. David." Amanda forwarded the email to Agent Mitchell immediately, then showed it to Marcus. "David Sullivan is coming back." "Why now? He's been avoiding our calls for weeks. Maybe he finally realized that Robert is going to pin everything on him if he doesn't fight back." At 1:45 p.m., Amanda and Marcus joined the stream of employees making their way to the main auditorium on the ground floor. The atmosphere was tense, with small groups of workers whispering among themselves and casting nervous glances toward the stage where Robert Chen would soon address them. Amanda chose a seat in the middle section, close enough to observe Robert's expressions, but far enough back to avoid drawing attention. She activated the voice recording app on her phone, keeping the device discreetly positioned to capture whatever announcement Robert was planning to make. At exactly 2 p.m., Robert walked onto the stage accompanied by Patricia Williams, Michael Torres, and 2 men Amanda didn't recognize. One appeared to be in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive suit, while the other was younger with the bearing of someone accustomed to corporate boardrooms. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began, his voice carrying its usual confident authority. "I've called this meeting to address some recent challenges our company has faced and to announce important changes that will secure Meridian's future." Amanda felt her pulse quicken as Robert continued. "Over the past month, we've been dealing with allegations from Morrison Industries regarding billing discrepancies on their contract. I'm pleased to announce that we've conducted a thorough internal investigation and identified the source of these problems." Robert paused, scanning the audience with the practiced timing of someone delivering a carefully rehearsed presentation. The investigation revealed that David Sullivan, our former senior project manager, systematically inflated charges to Morrison Industries and potentially other clients during his tenure with our company. Mr. Sullivan acted without authorization and concealed his activities from senior management through falsified documentation and misleading reports. A murmur ran through the audience as employees processed this information. Amanda noticed several people turning to look at each other with confusion and concern. Furthermore, Robert continued, our investigation discovered that Mr. Sullivan had accomplices within our organization who helped facilitate these fraudulent activities and attempted to cover up the evidence when the irregularities were discovered. Amanda's blood ran cold as she realized where this was heading. I regret to inform you that Amanda Richardson and Marcus Chen, both former members of our financial analysis team, have been terminated for their role in this scheme. Ms. Richardson, in particular, was found to have falsified audit reports and destroyed evidence in an attempt to protect Mr. Sullivan and conceal the full extent of the fraud. The auditorium erupted in shocked conversations as employees turned to look for Amanda and Marcus. Amanda felt hundreds of eyes searching for her, some belonging to colleagues who had worked with her for years and were clearly struggling to process Robert's accusations. Robert raised his hand for silence. I understand this news is shocking and disappointing. These individuals betrayed not only our company's trust, but also the trust of every person in this room. Their actions put every job at Meridian Technologies at risk. Amanda stood up slowly, her legs shaking, but her voice steady. That's a lie. The auditorium fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Robert's expression flickered with surprise before settling into controlled anger. Ms. Richardson, you are no longer an employee of this company and have no right to speak at this meeting. Security will escort you from the building. I have every right to defend myself against false accusations, Amanda replied, her voice carrying clearly through the room. And I have evidence that proves who really committed fraud against Morrison Industries and other clients. 2 security guards began moving toward her row, but Amanda continued speaking quickly. Robert Chen ordered David Sullivan to inflate billing to Morrison Industries to cover losses from the failed Henderson manufacturing project. He's been systematically defrauding clients for years, using profitable contracts to cover losses from failed projects. I have documentation proving that over $26 million has been stolen from 5 different clients over the past 3 years. The auditorium was now in complete chaos, with employees standing and talking loudly among themselves. Robert's carefully orchestrated presentation had become a public confrontation that was spiraling beyond his control. These are the desperate lies of a disgruntled employee who was caught participating in criminal activity, Robert said into his microphone, trying to regain control of the situation. Ms. Richardson was terminated for cause after our investigation. Revealed her involvement in Mr. Sullivan's scheme. Then explain this, Amanda called out, holding up David Sullivan's notebook. David documented every conversation he had with you about inflating client billing. He kept records because he knew you were ordering him to commit fraud. At that moment, the auditorium's rear doors opened and David Sullivan walked in, followed by Agent Sarah Mitchell and 3 other FBI agents. The federal agents were wearing their distinctive blue jackets with FBI printed in large yellow letters across the back. The room fell completely silent as David made his way down the center aisle toward the stage. He was carrying a briefcase and had the determined expression of someone who had finally decided to confront a situation he had been avoiding for months. Hello, Robert, David said as he reached the front of the auditorium. We need to talk. Robert's face had gone pale, but he maintained his composure. Mr. Sullivan, you are not welcome at this company. Security, please escort this individual from the premises. Agent Mitchell stepped forward, displaying her FBI credentials. Mr. Chen, I'm Agent Sarah Mitchell with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and money laundering. The auditorium erupted as employees realized they were witnessing a federal arrest. Several people began taking videos with their phones, while others sat in stunned silence trying to process what was happening. "This is a misunderstanding," Robert said, backing away from the microphone. "I demand to speak with my attorney." "You'll have that opportunity," Agent Mitchell replied calmly. "But first, I need to inform you of your rights." As Agent Mitchell began reading Robert his Miranda rights, David Sullivan opened his briefcase and pulled out a small digital recorder. "For the past 18 months, I've been recording my conversations with Robert Chen," David announced to the auditorium. "When he ordered me to inflate client billing to cover project losses, I documented everything because I knew it was illegal, and I wanted to protect myself." David activated the recorder, and Robert's voice filled the auditorium through the sound system. "David, Morrison Industries can absorb the additional costs from Henderson. We can't afford to write off $3 million in losses. The client will never audit their bills closely enough to notice the adjustments." The recording continued for several minutes, capturing multiple conversations where Robert explicitly ordered fraudulent billing and dismissed David's concerns about the legality of their actions. Amanda watched as Robert was handcuffed and led from the stage, his expression showing the shock of someone who had believed he was untouchable. The silver-haired man who had accompanied Robert onto the stage was also being questioned by FBI agents, apparently as part of a larger investigation into the company's financial practices. As the chaos subsided and employees began filing out of the auditorium, Agent Mitchell approached Amanda. "Ms. Richardson, thank you for your cooperation in this investigation. Your audit work provided crucial evidence that helped us build our case. What happens to the company now?" "That will depend on the extent of the fraud and whether the board of directors can restructure operations to satisfy the defrauded clients. The FBI will work with Morrison Industries and the other victims to recover as much of the stolen money as possible." Amanda looked around the auditorium, where small groups of employees were discussing what they had just witnessed. Many of them would lose their jobs regardless of whether Meridian survived as a company, and she felt the weight of responsibility for their uncertain futures. "Agent Mitchell, what about the employees who had nothing to do with the fraud? That's not within the FBI's jurisdiction, but I know that Morrison Industries and some of the other victims have expressed interest in hiring qualified Meridian employees for their own operations. This situation creates opportunities as well as challenges." 3 hours later, Amanda sat in the parking garage with David Sullivan and Marcus, sharing coffee from a nearby diner and trying to process everything that had happened. "I should have acted sooner," David said, staring into his coffee cup. "I knew what Robert was doing was wrong, but I convinced myself that going along with it was the lesser evil compared to letting the company fail." "You were in an impossible situation," Amanda replied. "Robert used his authority and the threat of unemployment to force people into choices they shouldn't have had to make. What will you do now?" Marcus asked David. "Testify at Robert's trial, obviously." "Beyond that, I'm not sure. My reputation in the industry is probably destroyed, regardless of whether I was following orders." Amanda pulled out her phone and showed them an email she had received an hour earlier. "Morrison Industries just offered me a position as their senior financial auditor. They want someone who understands how to identify and prevent the kind of fraud that Robert was committing." Marcus looked surprised. "Are you going to take it?" "I think so. The salary is actually higher than what I was making at Meridian before. Robert cut my pay, and they're offering positions to other Meridian employees who weren't involved in the fraud." David smiled for the first time all day. "So Robert's attempt to destroy your career actually led to a better opportunity?" "That seems to be the pattern. His efforts to cover up his crimes and silence potential witnesses were what ultimately led to his arrest. If he had simply taken responsibility for the Henderson project losses and worked with Morrison to resolve the billing discrepancies, he might have saved his company and avoided criminal charges." 3 months later, Amanda received an email with the subject line that had started this entire ordeal: salary adjustment, effective immediately. But this time, the email was from Morrison Industries, informing her of a promotion to Director of Financial Oversight, with a salary increase to $135,000 per year. She forwarded the email to Marcus, who had taken a position with TechFlow Solutions, and to Janet Kim, who was now working as a forensic accountant for the FBI. The subject line of her message was simple: "Sometimes doing the right thing pays off." Robert Chen was ultimately sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution of $28 million to the defrauded clients. Meridian Technologies was dissolved, but most of its employees found positions with other companies, often at higher salaries than they had been earning before the scandal. Amanda never regretted her decision to expose the fraud, even during the weeks when she was surviving on an $18,000 salary and facing an uncertain future. The experience had taught her that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about doing the right thing, especially when it's difficult, expensive, and frightening. And sometimes, when you're willing to sacrifice everything for the truth, the universe has a way of rewarding that courage with opportunities you never could have imagined. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.